Before we take a look at Series 2, I thought it would be fun to rank each of Series 1's episodes, mainly because I like making and ordering lists, but also because it gives me a chance to talk a bit more about these episodes individually, outside of the confines of a full retrospective video. So let's get into it. To make this list, I stared into the heart of the TARDIS, and it gave me the objective, definitive ranking of all of Series 1's episodes. I then took that order and rearranged it to fit my own personal opinion. I don't think it's the worst episode ever made, but The Long Game is easily the weak link in Series 1. It's especially frustrating because it contains a really good idea with the manipulation of the news, but instead of exploring this great concept, the episode decides to focus on all of the wrong things. Simon Pegg is underutilized, the Jagrafess feels shoehorned in, and you can tell that someone on the production team just loved that brain effect. Adam Mitchell is also very annoying, and I get that that's the point, but it doesn't make him any easier to watch. I suppose it's kind of interesting seeing a companion be rejected, that doesn't happen too often, and making it because he tried to profit from travelling in the TARDIS is a good concept, but it just feels like another idea that the episode doesn't have time to fully explore. The episode does at least set up the events of Bad Wolf though, and even if the later episode gives you a little recap, I still think it's worth watching The Long Game to get the maximum effect. I appreciate how there's no hint here that the Doctor's actions are going to cause any problems, like that reveal is saved entirely for Bad Wolf. You get a conclusion that absolutely works for this story, only to have it completely recontextualized later on, and that is interesting. I'm convinced that The End of the World was scheduled solely to convince skeptical viewers that the show could create realistic-looking aliens, with the plot being designed specifically as an excuse to show off a variety of different creatures. I obviously have no proof of this, but I can't deny that these are some fantastic-looking aliens. The Mox of Balhoun, Jade, and of course the Face of Bo are some great creations. I don't think the plot is anything to write home about, but as a camp, cheesy runaround, you could do a lot worse. Cassandra is a guilty pleasure, and the Doctor's interactions with the other guests is a joy to watch. What made this episode difficult to place was the phenomenal final scene, which stands as one of the best moments in the entire show, at least in my opinion. Eccleston delivers the speech perfectly, just really selling the emotion without ever being melodramatic. Character-wise, I love Rose's response to this too, first being gently curious before letting the Doctor know that he isn't completely alone anymore. The final line about getting chips makes me smile every time. It's not a very long scene, but it is a very sweet moment and one that I always look forward to on a rewatch. The argument in the observation room is also great, but the episode as a whole never manages to hit the highs of these two scenes again. The Unquiet Dead is really solid, you know? It's like bread and butter Doctor Who, an entertaining 45 minutes that you'll probably forget as soon as it's finished. That might sound like I'm being too harsh, but sometimes you need a story like that. I think the two biggest strengths of this one are the location and the supporting cast. The Victorian setting is gorgeous, resulting in maybe the best looking episode of the series. It has a cozy, period drama feel that the BBC can always pull off really well. As for the supporting cast, Eve Miles as Gwyneth was such a good choice, and her slowly opening up to the Doctor and Rose is really well paced throughout the episode. I love the scene when her and Rose are laughing about boys and then her face just drops suddenly, it gets me every time. Simon Callow is also great as Charles Dickens. I think what makes his portrayal special as opposed to later famous authors is that the Doctor is willing to question and argue with him a lot more. Yeah, they have the scene in the cab where the Doctor nerds out a bit, but then later he'll tell him to shut up when he's being unhelpful. Dickens is also much less accepting of the supernatural straight away, and unlike, say, Shakespeare in the Shakespeare Code, he saves the day with an idea that he thought of, rather than just because he's Charles Dickens and he's good with words. The plot doesn't revolve around him like it does with the other authors, he's just involved by chance and decides ultimately to help out. Mark Gatiss is clearly a Dickens fan, and his suggestion that the Blue Elementals are behind the mystery of Edwin Drood is great stuff. Numbers 8 and 9 were quite difficult to rank, but I decided to place The Unquiet Dead slightly higher. There's nothing here as compelling as the final scene of The End of the World, but I think it's the more consistent story overall, and one that I should go back to more often. It might not blow you away or stay as fresh in your mind, but you'll still have a great time with this story. It's a gas. 9, Rose, Jack, and Mickey might just be the best TARDIS team we never had. They are so good together, and it's such a shame that we only get one episode with all 4 of them. I love how the first 10 minutes or so is just these people hanging out, bickering, making jokes, all of that stuff. I love seeing Mickey make the joke at the table, and everyone laughs, like you feel like he's finally been accepted into the group. In terms of the actual story, it would be fairly basic if it wasn't for the phenomenal performance of Annette Badland, who really elevates the personal stakes of this one. It's not about the destruction of the world, it's about the consequences for this one character and how they face the threat of their own death. I feel like when people talk about the Slitheen, they go to the fart jokes or to their appearances with Sarah Jane, but this is easily their best portrayal. Margaret is sinister, cunning, and manipulative, but also genuinely three-dimensional. You buy her sadness at losing her family and her desperation when she's pleading for her life. This entire dinner scene is gold. I really can't praise it enough. Series 1 doesn't have any Dr. Light episodes, but this one feels functional in the way that those later episodes do. It has to set up the heart of the TARDIS, introduce the extrapolator, and develop the Mickey and Rose relationship ready for the finale. The Cardiff base location was also probably a budgetary decision, literally setting an episode in the city where the show is filmed and only having one major character outside of our 4 regulars. But these character interactions are so good that even a small-scale pit stop like this ends up feeling like a fulfilling story in its own right. It's weird seeing the Slitheen in a serious political story after becoming familiar with them as a more comical villain. Granted, this wouldn't have been the case on first broadcast, but I still think it's a difficult story to pin down tonally. Trying to balance an allegory of the war on terror with farting aliens is a difficult thing to do, and I would completely understand if such a mix would put people off. But for me, I can't help but view it as quite endearing that the show would even try to tell this story in this way, and with the tone that early Series 1 had established. They do lean into the comedic potential of the Slitheen, and they're often portrayed as pantomime villains when in human form, but I still think they get a few moments of genuine menace, like the conversation in the doorway and when Jackie and Mickey are attacked in his flat. As for their plan, the mystery of aliens faking aliens is a clever one, and weaponizing the human tendency to panic is a scarily realistic idea. Even if you find it hard to take the alien threat seriously, I think the episode makes a good decision in making the emotional stakes the heart of the story, with both the opening and the finale being framed around the conflict between our regulars. Take the opening. Everything about the initial return to Earth is perfect. The posters, Jackie's reaction, the conversation afterwards, it is so well done. Honestly, I think this might be Camille Coduria's finest hour. She has so many great moments throughout this story that I lose track. She really nails that complex mix of emotions, being angry at Rose, but also glad that she's safe, being scared at how she's changed, her guilt at how she treated Mickey, and of course that final gut punch when she asks Rose not to go back to the Doctor. There's also the conversation over the phone, which explores the complicated morality of the Doctor even taking a companion in the first place, probably the first time that this is brought up in the show. I also like it when she calls the Slitheen a slicky. If there's one thing even better than Jackie, then you know it's Harriet Jones MP for Flydale North. She really is one of the great characters of the Davies era, and this episode does a great job at creating a fully fleshed out character in quite a short space of time. It's the little things, like how she doesn't like saying the word fart, or the way she instructs the Doctor on the correct way to pass the alcohol round, before it becomes the much bigger thing of making a principled stand in the cabinet room. It's characters like this that make this strange story work as well as it does. For every mature idea, there's an equally silly one, but the drama is potent enough to survive the occasional cringeworthy moment. It's hard to talk about Rose without appreciating everything that this episode needed to accomplish. It had to introduce the show to new fans, reintroduce it to old ones, establish our leads and our secondary characters and the status quo for the rest of the series, explain key concepts like the TARDIS, and function as an entertaining story in its own right. Even if the series does have better episodes down the line, the fact that Rose manages to tick all of these boxes is something worth celebrating. This episode's been reviewed to death, so I won't go on too much about it, but one thing I really like is the subplot with Clive and how Rose goes to visit him. Making the Doctor the obsession of a conspiracy theorist is a great idea, and Mark Benton makes him such a likeable secondary character. His realization right before he dies that everything about the Doctor was true just kills me every time I hear it. I would say that I'm surprised that they haven't explored this angle again, but I think the backlash to Love and Monsters probably dampened any enthusiasm for a conspiracy based around the Doctor. Also, a modern day conspiracy theorist would probably be a bit less innocent than Clive the family man who worked in his shed. Nowadays, Clive would probably think that the Doctor started COVID or something, and that's not great. Also, just briefly on the villain, they might be relegated to, Monster of the Week, but I still think that the Autons were a great choice for this story. Sure, the climax is just Spearhead from space, but who wouldn't want to see those shop window dummies come to life on the high street? They even break the glass this time. Now that's progress. The thing that makes The Empty Child and the Doctor dances such a joy is just how strange the concept is on paper, but how well all the different parts come together in practice. The gas mask zombies are such a bizarre creation, but the way the nanogenes work makes the concept feel completely believable, and it's refreshing to have the villain be scared and confused rather than outright evil. It's a story that plays on the mystery behind the antagonist, taking time to reveal how and why everything is happening, and the bleak setting makes for a great noir atmosphere for this mystery to unfold in. That being said, there are lighter moments spread throughout the story, and what's impressive here is that they never ruin the oppressive atmosphere of the premise and the setting. Captain Jack Harkness offers some comic relief, but he's a slightly more subdued version of what the character would become. He's still flirty and charming, but he's also morally dubious and vulnerable, traits that in the main show at least disappear once he becomes immortal. The dialogue is also so witty and quotable throughout that you end up with a story in which you never want the characters to stop talking. Eccleston's interaction with the children during dinner is one of my favourite scenes of the entire series, and I will never not laugh at the Doctor trying to resonate concrete. Yes, the ending is quite melodramatic, but it's all delivered with such conviction that I defy anyone not to crack a smile during those closing 10 minutes. With a story as bleak as this, sometimes you need a little bit of light at the end of it all. I'm sure there are people who would put this one higher, and I wouldn't blame anyone for doing so. My preference for the other three stories is more down to liking things that they do rather than disliking any aspect of this story. Beautifully written, and with some stellar direction to boot, this is a strange piece of sci-fi horror that manages to be as scary as it is romantic. Now that's an achievement. If nothing else, Dalek is a masterclass in efficient writing and plotting. In just 45 minutes, Robert Shearman not only re-establishes the credibility of the series' most iconic villain, but emphasises their intelligence and cunning in a way not explored on TV since the Troughton era, all whilst commenting on the fictional villain's place in British culture and establishing the show's status quo that would continue unchanged for the next 7 years. There's obviously a lot of things going on here, but re-establishing the credibility of the Daleks is probably the most important part, and this episode makes them genuinely scary, if not to look at, then certainly to think about. The threat that this Dalek poses is also bolstered by Eccleston's finest performance as the Doctor. Their confrontation in the cell is perfect from start to finish, as is the conversation they have over the video link, leading to one of the best lines in the entire show. I also think that Van Statten is a great secondary villain, and a character that often gets forgotten about in comparison to the Dalek itself. I love arrogant humans that think they can exploit these vastly superior villains, and Van Statten fits the bill perfectly. He's the character you love to hate, who gets a satisfying but kind of pessimistic ending. If I'm being honest though, Shearman's Dalek is almost too good of a creation. This one Dalek is so capable that it almost cheapens their later appearances. How can a whole army of Daleks lose when just one of them is so much of a threat? But this isn't Shearman's fault, and I can forgive weaker Dalek sequels in later years for the sake of such a good first impression. Other than that, there's not really much else to say, other than I wish that Shearman had stayed on to do more than just one TV appearance. I'm a beginner when it comes to Big Finish, but every Shearman story I've heard is phenomenal. Maybe he'll come back one day, but even if he doesn't, I'm glad we got this episode. I'm not going to pretend that the series finale is the best written story of the bunch. Both Dalek and The Empty Child two-parter are more consistent stories overall, with tighter plotting and more satisfying conclusions. But it's the ideas and concepts that make this one so compelling and raised it to the number 2 spot on this list. For one thing, I love the game shows in part 1. They're so surreal, and I personally find them sinister as opposed to outright silly. I think it's the scene of Fitch breaking down on the weakest link that really sells the threat of the situation. I also think that the Doctor in the diary room might be one of my favourite pre-title scenes ever. Some people think that the choice of game shows dates the episode, but I've never found it to be too much of a problem. I wasn't old enough to watch this when it came out, and so I don't actually know what TV show Captain Jack is meant to be on. The only one I've seen is The Weakest Link, so I still think you can get the gist of each game without having watched all of them. It's just such a weird, gaudy idea, something that only this show would ever attempt, and I love it for that. If the game shows aren't your thing, then maybe you can be compensated with one of the best Dalek outings in all of Doctor Who, classic or revival. Depicting the Daleks as insane, self-loathing zealots is a phenomenal idea. There was already an air of religious fervour in their hatred, but this makes it explicit, and it is a horrifying concept. The story doesn't pull any punches in dealing with their cruelty either. The Daleks purposefully go down and target the people stuck on the game station, even though it serves no purpose, just because they want to do it, and it goes a long way to sell the threat that they pose. This two-parter also has so many great character moments that I can barely keep track of them. There's the Doctor's promise to Linda, his realisation that he caused 100 years of hell, his promise to Rose, his realisation and then confrontation with the Daleks. In 90 minutes, this Doctor shifts between every possible emotion and never drops the ball. I love the brief moment where him and Linda laugh about the Bear With Me Christmas special, and then on the flip side when he angrily shuts down the suggestion that the staff are just doing their jobs. And then there's the scene where he sends Rose home and that crushing final message. Seeing how well he can fake being excited in order to get Rose to go along with it is heartbreaking. And then when the hologram asks her to have a good life, yeah, it's cut and onions time. Sure, the ending might be a little bit convenient, but like I mentioned in my retrospective video, it took a lot for both of these characters to get to this point, so I think they earned it. And of course, it cost the Doctor his life, so it's not like everyone managed to survive quite as easily as Jack did. Sorry, Elaine. If you watched my retrospective of the series, you might have been expecting this placement, given how much I talked about it, and how I suggested that the show has never again matched the personal stakes that this story creates. Like I said in that video, I think part of that is down to how simple the premise is, and the fact that once you've done it, you probably couldn't get away with doing it again. A character going back and saving the life of their previously dead parent is like time travel fiction 101, and several of the emotional beats essentially write themselves. It would also be hard to do another story like this without repeating the same conflict, and so Father's Day gets to reap the emotional benefits without having to worry about another story coming along and potentially doing it better. But even if the show did attempt to tell this story again, it would be difficult to beat because Father's Day succeeds in pretty much everything it tries and turns an already strong premise into a perfect 45 minutes of television. Right off the bat, this is easily Billie Piper's best performance as Rose. From her awkward small talk with the Doctor when she's trying to avoid his eye, to her holding Pete's hand on the face, she nails every moment of this script, both big and small. I also love the Doctor's characterisation as well, that he's aware of the risk they're taking but allows his judgment to be slowly clouded as the situation gets worse and worse. Their argument in the flat feels so real, with some of the best character writing in the entire show, and a conflict in which the perspective of both participants feels completely understandable. The highlight though is of course Sean Dingwall as Pete Tyler, and it's amazing just how quickly the episode manages to get you to care about him. There's something about a character with obvious flaws but whose heart is ultimately in the right place that's just so endearing. Pete's sacrifice at the end is completely believable for his character, someone who might not be perfect day to day, but in the grand scheme of things loves his family and will do what he needs in order to protect them. I appreciate how the episode doesn't sugarcoat Jackie and Pete's relationship in an attempt to artificially venerate Pete as a character. It adds an extra layer of emotion to the story. It's a very character-driven story, but from a plot perspective, I do think that the inclusion of the Reapers was a good idea, because it means that we don't have to waste too much time convincing Pete about Rose being from the future, as well as providing a cause for Pete's growing feeling of obligation as more people are killed. Yeah, the thing with the glowing TARDIS key doesn't make much sense, but it doesn't really need to make sense when it exists in order to be removed from the situation. Overall, Father's Day explores the full emotional weight of its premise, mixing tense drama with some beautiful character moments, and is my pick for the best episode of Series 1. Let me know what you think about Series 1's episodes in the comments and how you would rank them. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts, especially given how strong of a series this is. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the other side of the wall for Series 2. Bring some tissues. For crying in.